Hi, I'm Beth Dooley, and today we're going to make roasted squash and apple salad on local fresh spinach. And then we're also going to make hazelnut Parmesan crisp using the American Hazelnut Company hazelnut flour. I am a local food junkie. I've written 10 cookbooks, all of them focused on local food, including the Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen, which won the James Beard Award in 2018. And then I'm a columnist for the Star Tribune, and I'm on NPR's Appetites about once a month with Tom Cran. So here we go. For the squash and the apple salad, they're beautiful together. I mean, squash is roasty and kind of nutty tasting. It's a little sweet. The apples are tart. They're both in season right now. And one of the reasons why I like working with butternut squash is because it's relatively easy to skin. And then the apples, we're going to use a honey crisp, but a Haralson would be really lovely too, because it's nice and tart and it balances that nutty sweet flavor of the squash beautifully. Now, squash is an indigenous food, so I like to also work with things that have always been here. I start by taking off the top, and yes, you can do this at home. And then I take off the base, so you have a firm base to stand them on. I just finished a book for the University of Minnesota Press called The Perennial Kitchen, which lifts up the work being done to perennialize our land, to do more regenerative agriculture, and the work of our universities, our researchers, our farmers, our millers and bakers who are collaborating on this work so that we can not only share in these incredible ingredients, have this wonderful bread that's made with freshly milled flour, for instance, from Bakersfield Flour and Bread, but also create a regenerative economy for our farmlands. We're just going to chunk this up. You want the pieces to be about, maybe about 1.5 inches. They don't have to be real tiny, but you want them. I don't like to wait forever for my squash to cook, so when you do it like this, the squash will be ready in about 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm using this hazelnut oil because, again, it has that really nice nutty flavor that's going to work so well with both the flavor of the squash as well as the apples. You don't need a lot, but you do want to make sure that the pieces are mostly coated. I'm just going to sprinkle this with a little bit of coarse salt, and again, I'm not really measuring because I just want to make sure that most of the pieces have a little bit of salt on them. The reason why I like to salt vegetables before I put them in the oven to roast is that the salt draws the moisture up from the vegetable and it helps dehydrate them a little bit, and that's what roasting does. It concentrates flavors by dehydrating the juices in the vegetable while it cooks, and so it adds flavor as well as helps to dehydrate the vegetable a little bit. So we're just going to throw this in the oven. It's set to about 425. Anywhere between 400 and 450 is a good temperature. You want it moderately hot because you want to create that sort of caramelization. I'm really excited about what's going on with local food because we've expanded the definition in to talk about more than vegetables, which are great, and more than the meats and the proteins. There's a lot going on in the artisan grain movement. And if you look for hulless barley, for instance, or rye berries, or wheat berries, or farro, and you go to Lake Winds Co-op, you'll see that they're marked local. They're super nutritious. They make a wonderful alternative to pasta because these are complex carbohydrates. They're also really good for the land, and they have the potential to interrupt the corn and soy rotation, which is monocropping, which is really devastating to our environment. And so I'd encourage you to look for things like, for instance, rye berries. That's what these are. And we're going to cook these. It's so easy. You just dump them in a pot and you add about 4 inches of water to cover the grain, and then you get it boiling. Once it boils, I'm going to reduce the heat, cover it, and cook it until it opens. And I like it to open a lot so that the grain almost bursts, because this is pretty chewy. It will take anywhere between 35 to 45 or maybe even 50 minutes, but you just keep an eye on it. All right, these are the Parmesan crisps, and I'm using hazelnut flour, which is ground from nuts after they've been pressed for hazelnut oil by the American Hazelnut Company up in Ashland, Wisconsin. And I love it because they're local nuts, they're really good for the land, they're perennial, so they come back every year. They make a great windbreak on farms, they're good fodder for animals. They also have very deep roots, which help trap the water and keep it on the land. This is the hazelnut flour. This goes in first. And then I'm gonna add 2 egg whites. And you can save the yolks for a mayonnaise or an aioli, or to just enrich an omelet, for instance. Then I'm gonna add a pinch of salt, a pinch of pepper, and red pepper flakes. And it really doesn't matter what order you add these things, and this is a very simple recipe. I'm gonna add some Parmesan cheese, and then just a couple teaspoons of thyme, fresh thyme. The easiest way to get thyme off the stalk is just to strip it like this. So I'm gonna use my hands to mix this batter together. It's a dough. It comes together really nicely. It's gonna be a nice stiff dough. You wanna get it all worked in so that it looks like this. And then what I like to do is I'm gonna do it in this parchment-lined baking sheet. I'm gonna spread it out with my hands. And you wanna get it fairly thin as you're making the rectangle. So what helps, because your hands get sticky, is to put another layer of parchment over it. And then just work it and keep working it until you get it to the thinness that you want. One of the nice things about the hazelnut oil bottle is that it's such a perfect shape. I often just use it as the rolling pin because it fits right in the pan. My rolling pin doesn't fit in a sheet pan. So, and it's not going to get messy because we have this layer of parchment paper over it. These are not supposed to be perfect. They're crisps and they're delicious spread with a little bit of cheese or to use as a cracker that goes with soups. I'm going to use these to garnish the salad that we're making, the roast squash and apple salad. So that's about right. It's a little under an 1/18 of an inch thick. And then if you want to get fancy, you can trim the edges a little bit. But then what we're going to do is score these with this. These go into a low oven. It's 275. And you want to bake them until they're really pretty hard and crisp. The rye berries are finished cooking. They're right here. And one thing I love about the rye berries is that you can make a big batch of these ahead and you can keep them in the refrigerator. You can't do that with pasta. It gets really slimy, but these hold their texture and their flavor for about a week. We're gonna whisk together the vinaigrette. We're gonna pull the squash out of the oven. It's almost done, it's nice and roasty, and we're gonna chop up some apple, and then that's gonna be the salad. And we're gonna garnish it with the Parmesan hazelnut crisps. So this is a shallot. And I like using shallots instead of garlic, especially when things are raw, because they tend to be milder and a little sweeter, and yet they have that, they don't have any of the bitter flavor that garlic often does. They also can stay in a salad dressing a little longer without, again, turning it bitter. So I'm just gonna chop this up. So this is gonna go into the bowl. I'm gonna add, and again, I like to eyeball things, but you do have exact quantities on the recipes you're receiving. So about equal parts mustard to maple syrup, Maple syrup is another lovely local product. It adds a nice woodsy note. It works beautifully with the hazelnut oil. A little bit of apple cider vinegar, and again, I'm going to eyeball it. So that's going to go in. And then the nice thing about the hazelnut oil is that it has so much flavor that I use less. And so I'm going to use a ratio of about the same amount of oil to the same amount of vinegar in this bowl. And most salad dressings are 1/3 acid to 2/3 oil, but this one is about half and half. And so I'll have more than I'm actually going to use, but I'm going to stick that in a jar and save it for later on. So there's our vinaigrette. And now I'm going to pull the squash out of the oven. Don't be afraid to overcook it a little bit. I mean, some of these pieces may look a little brown, but they're delicious because they're really crunchy and caramelized tasting. Squash has a lot of natural sugar in it, and so when you roast it, you're pulling up those sugars to the surface, and you want them to brown and get sort of caramelized and roasty. Let's check on the crackers. You just need to keep an eye on them after about 20 minutes, and it looks like they're done. So we're going to slide them over here onto the countertop. Now that these are room temperature, I can put my hand on them. I'm going to slide them over to the cutting board. And then I've already made some initial cuts, so I'm just going to separate them further. And after I do that, I'm going to put them up on the pastry rack and let them cool off so that the air underneath them circulates a little bit and helps them get crisper a little more quickly. All right, so I'm just going to cut up this beautiful apple. It's a Honey Crisp, and it's nice and tart, a little juicy. I also like using Haralson. Those are wonderful local apples. All of these were bred by the University of Minnesota, and they're all grown here by our wonderful local growers in smaller orchards like Hoke. Hoke does a beautiful job. These are ready to go. I'm going to put these rye berries that are cooked down as a base over the greens. I'm using local spinach here now, but you could use arugula, you could use dark leafy greens, you could even use kale if it's chopped. Okay. And then I'm going to toss in the squash, some of the apple, and then dried cranberries always make for a nice little pop of color and a little more tartness, both tart and sweet. These are dried from our local cranberry bogs down in Wisconsin. And then we're just going to drizzle this with a little bit of the dressing. I've chopped a few scallions to throw on top. And then these hazelnut crackers, these Parmesan hazelnut crackers, make a nice accompaniment. So we'll tuck those in there, and there you go. One of the things I hope you leave with is seeing how easy this salad is. And it's a wonderful, healthy main dish salad made with all local ingredients that are super fresh. And it came together in about 20 minutes at the most. And it's delicious. And enjoy.